Hi and welcome to episode 9 of Beating BDD, a podcast about body dysmorphia disorder from the BDD Foundation in the UK. I'm Claire Atherton and this is the second part of my interview with Omari Eccleston-Brown. In it, Omari describes the things that helped him most in treatment and beyond, and gives some valuable advice to anyone trying to help a loved one with BDD. Here's his interview. What about getting diagnosed and having sort of formal treatment? What can you tell us about that?
I'd done various different forms of therapy. I'd done some hypnotherapy, I'd done some counselling, and I'd even done some CBT, which was what ultimately made the biggest difference. But it was in 2012, and I'd first gone to a support group for BDD, which, just as a side note, I'd really like to say is so important. And, you know, to any listeners who deal with BDD, if you can find yourself a support group, then do. They're magic. And so I went to a support group where it was in the Priory, I remember, on a sort of Sunday afternoon. And it was the first time I'd ever been with anybody else who had BDD. And I remember there were about, 10 of us. And like a reasonably equal mix of men and women, which was also very healing for me, because it was like, wow. Because I'd also carried this shame as a man of having a body image issue and being a guy. And that also, another thing that was not allowed about it, right? And so that was so amazing, that one experience, that I was like, right, I really need to get some support around this. And I found out about a trial that they were doing at a hospital in London called the Maudsley, which specializes in anxiety disorders. And I was just in a moment of just like, right, I'm having this. And I remember I sort of, the next day or a couple of days later, marched myself in there and just said, right, I hear you're doing a trial. I need to get on it. And I'm glad I did that, because I know that getting support on the NHS is one of the things that many people find really difficult. And it's one of the biggest frustrations, and also it can be super disheartening to think that you need help and you can't get it. And sometimes I think actually advocating for yourself is kind of what's needed. But I also count myself very fortunate that, it was there and they kind of went, oh, okay. And so I got myself onto this trial, which was sort of 12 sessions back to back and then 4 follow-up sessions. And it was CBT specifically for BDD. And I remember my therapist, his name was Martin. He was amazing. And what I really liked about it was that it was practical. I do believe in like the benefits of things more like psychotherapy, which kind of try and go to like the root cause and look at sort of maybe the subconscious and things like that. But I think because BDD is based so much on your behaviors, and that's what keeps it alive. And like I said at the beginning, one of my sort of main definitions of recovery is the extent to which you can limit those behaviors. That's what was great about it, because I was given really practical things to do, like exposure techniques. So I remember being given a task of even just trying to see where my attention was at. Because we talk about self-focused attention, which is a big thing in BDD, focused on yourself. How am I feeling? How do I look? How are people perceiving me? All those sorts of thoughts, right? Versus outward focus. What sounds am I hearing? What am I seeing? Not about myself, right? But what am I seeing? And hopefully not about other people comparing, because that's another big thing. But, what does that tree look like? And just using getting in touch with your senses. And another one that was really helpful for me was just a simple walking to the end of the road. And I remember I was invited to just walk from my house to the end of the road and then back again. And then just keep a chart of how much my anxiety was on a scale of 1 to 10. And then just see if it diminished from where it was at the very beginning when I first stepped out of my house to when I came back. And sure enough, it had. Maybe the first time it was at like a 8, and then it went down to a 7.5 by the time I was back. And then it was just to keep extending that. So to, walk for a bit further. And then obviously that's when I'm on my own, right? And I may or may not even see anybody. And then to try doing that without my glasses. And then try doing, without my glasses when I'm talking to somebody. Or I go to the shops and actually have to have a conversation. And then just to keep on going up the scale. But also what was great was you actually kind of create a scale of what would be the most anxious or most anxiety provoking. And to kind of have where you can dial it up or dial it down. So if I say, for instance, doing something without my glasses, low on the scale would be walking down the road without my glasses. Slightly higher up on the scale would be going to the newsagents who doesn't know me, and I know I'm going to have a brief exchange. Maybe at the very top of the scale would be taking a photograph without my glasses and then looking at it. And so there was always that freedom to dial up, dial down. And it wasn't like, and didn't mean that, and, you know, often one of the things I say about recovery is not linear. And it's like, it didn't mean that just because on one day I managed something that was a level 7, I have to go to level 8 the next day. I might be only ready for a level 4, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything else in the course of therapy that you learnt, or any other aspects of it that you found particularly helpful?
Definitely. One of the major pieces was, because it's cognitive as well as behavioural, so it's kind of looking at your thought processes. And one of the biggest things that we spent a lot of time on was this idea of theory A and theory B. Theory A being everything I normally believed, which was that, you know, I am ugly, and the reason I see myself in the mirror as ugly is because I have a physical condition. And this is, I think, the key bit. It's like, and therefore, because I have a physical condition, I have to do these things about it, which is I have to wear glasses, I have to buy lots of eye creams, I have to wear makeup. For me, I have to wear sunglasses when I brush my teeth, because otherwise it'd be too distressing. And you kind of get the idea, right? And so you realize that from this one core belief, all these other things follow, which are actions or beliefs. Because I'm ugly, that's why that person didn't give me my change. It's because I'm ugly. Or that's why that person yawned, because they see me and they think, and they see me tired, and therefore they're feeling tired, which used to be one of my things. Versus theory B, which is, okay, I do have a problem, which I think is key to get that. It's not that you don't have a problem, you do have a problem, but it's where's that problem located? And I have a psychological problem, I have a mental problem, and therefore it still needs to be addressed. But from the mental problem, there's a whole bunch of different thoughts or actions that follow. You know, if I go out without my glasses and nothing happens, well, that's probably because there's nothing wrong. That person probably didn't give me my change, right? Because actually I saw that they just were on the phone and they were a bit stressed by what they're talking about, and they were probably being absent-minded in that moment. That person yawned because maybe they're tired. You know, all sorts of things. And I think also one of the most useful things is it gives you the appropriate tool. So I always say, like, if there's weeds in your garden, you know, you're not going to go at it with a spoon. You need to have the appropriate tool. You need a trowel, you need a spade, or whatever. And I think CBT kind of was like, okay, there are weeds, but let's actually use the appropriate tool to get those weeds out.
Yeah, very interesting. Did you do anything else alongside to help yourself? And if so, what did you do?
Yeah, so, I mean, as I've kind of gone on this journey, I've realized that I've had to be my own therapist in many ways. So I've done many things. So one thing I find really helpful is mindfulness and meditation. You know, going back to the thing we said earlier about awareness, just to notice how I'm feeling and what my triggers are. And I was talking to some people earlier today, and I realized that through kind of that practice, when I look in the mirror, I'm more able to say to myself, you know, I'm not seeing how I look, I'm seeing how I feel. And actually, it's almost like what I'm seeing in the mirror is a clue to what's actually going on in my life or how I'm feeling. It's like, oh, I'm seeing that I must be stressed, more stressed than I realized, because what I'm seeing is particularly bad. Or I must be feeling like agitated, or I must be feeling sad, or I must be feeling, it's almost like a indicator. So the mindfulness has really helped with just kind of going, okay, what's that feeling? And, you know, one of the things that mindfulness encourages you to do is to just stay with that feeling and not go anywhere with it. You know, not go to, oh, I'm feeling this and therefore, and all the stuff that we normally add on as the story. It's just kind of go, okay, just notice that you feel stressed or you feel whatever. So that's really helped. I think, you know, I've read quite a lot of different books about different things. There's books on BDD specifically. There's a great one, which is called Overcoming BDD, which was written by Professor David Veals, pretty much the leading expert on BDD in this country, and Dr. Rob Wilson as well, and Alex Clare, the three of them together. There's The Broken Mirror by Catherine Phillips, MD, who's from the States, was like a really important book. But then there's also been a whole host of any books from sort of self-development to things like, you know, Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. I remember that book in particular made a really big difference. I remember 2016, I discovered that book, and when he talks about the pain body, and kind of really kind of related to that. And I don't think it's just because it had the word body in it, but yeah. So there've been many things that have been really helpful.
I understand you also did an Instagram campaign for a whole year. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, yeah. So that campaign was really wonderful. It was called In the Face of BDD, and essentially what I did for a whole year was I went up to people, including my family and friends, but many just strangers on the street, in the post office, in the queue or whatever, and I shared with them about BDD and also about my own personal story about BDD. And, telling them it was my eyes and trying to be open like that. And every person I spoke to, I asked them to take a photograph of me. And I kind of had 3 rules for that photograph. And they were that it would be one take. So regardless of how it came out, that's what I posted. And there'd be no filters. Obviously, on Instagram, there's lots of easy temptation to do that. And the other one was that there'd be no selfies, meaning that I wouldn't take the picture myself. I would hand my camera over and ask them to take the picture. And, each one of those 3 things, had some thought behind it, which was kind of connected to the CBT. It was about, because again, one of the most important things with CBT is that you have planned exposure. And that's what it was. It was like, okay, every day I know at some point I'm going to expose myself in this way, but knowing why I'm doing it. But also it wasn't going to be sprung on me. Like at some point I'm going to decide, okay, this is when I want to do it. I'm going to decide on the person and I'm going to invite them to do it. So, and obviously the no filter and the one take was to just give up that control of trying to make it perfect and trying to present myself in a certain way. And I kind of realized through it that when I give up control, I don't lose control. And that was a really important one for me, because I was giving up all these controls to this other person and say, all right, you capture me and how are you going to capture me? But the fear is always that, when we give up control, we're going to suddenly lose it and we're not going to have ground. We want to seek something and we want to hold on to something. And I realized that actually it gave me a real freedom, because it was like, okay, well, that's a crap photo, but on it goes. And it was wonderful because in the process of, 365 days, not only did I have a chance to speak to lots of family members, lots of my friends who, friends who are not my closest friends, but people say I dance with, and just kind of be real. I spoke to so many strangers and it invited so much sharing. That's what I was really blown away by. I mean, I had some amazing conversations with other people who, some people who even had BDD, but lots of people who just were dealing with some other mental health issue or some other trouble, or people who knew somebody who had BDD. And, I always say that, BDD affects, 1 in 50 people. So that's 2% of the population. So it's actually, if you think you're on a bus, there's somebody on that bus who's got BDD. So it is really very common. And so it was just great to kind of spark the conversation. It was really healing for me to deal with it, because, I had days where I so did not want to.
I can imagine,
to have my picture taken, where I was feeling really raw. I remember one day in particular, which now actually I look back to it as my proudest moment. But I was in Portugal, hadn't slept that night, or barely, woke up with conjunctivitis. So, I've got pink eye and it's all red and sore. I've got pus coming up my eyes. And I just feel like awful. But, it's day 200 and something. And I'm like, I can't stop, And so I remember I had my friend take my picture. And I think the first picture I took that day was from, I don't know, I had my friend maybe a good 7 to 10 meters away. So it was kind of safe. And I kind of realized, that was a safe option and I'm still trying to hide. So then later on in the day, I had a different friend. We were flying back to London and I said, look, can you take my picture? And then she kind of set herself up, I don't know, let's say 4 meters away from me. And I was like, no, I really want you to get up in my face. And it's because I was like, you know what? If I can do this, if I can have a picture on this day with these circumstances and how I'm feeling, then you know what? I can kind of do anything. And, I forget that often, but sometimes I actually do genuinely look back at that picture and it still looks horrific to me. But what's stronger than that is this feeling of, you know what? Yeah. And it helps me remember that on other days when I'm like, I'm feeling vulnerable, or like I don't want to go out without my glasses or something like, because that still happens. It kind of gives me that encouragement. So yeah, that was also another way that I suppose I've done my own healing. And I kind of say to people, because people often ask about it and they go, oh, well, that's great and that's amazing. And it was. And I say that obviously it was pretty extreme at the same time. And I don't imagine, certainly I don't think that that's the only way to recover. Definitely not. And I certainly wouldn't prescribe it.
Yeah.
But I think what I would recommend to people from it was, again, the sharing bit. Because I think I'm getting to a place where you can, again, find those few people who you trust and take the leap to share with them. And I think people will be surprised at the generosity that people show, because I was so blown away by the generosity and the openness that people showed me. And again, this is including strangers.
That is really nice. Interestingly, I had someone write an email in the other day saying that she knew someone who just recently confided in her that this person had BDD. And she was saying she hadn't found very many resources for people in her position. So do you have any particular advice that you could give her and people like her?
Yeah. So I think a good place to start for those resources is bddfoundation.org. So that's a charity, which is fantastic. And I think if you go onto their website, under the tab that says support, you can see like some examples of, if you are somebody like this person who's emailed in, who knows somebody or cares for somebody who deals with BDD, some of the things that you can do, as well as some of the things that are best not to do. And there's also even support groups, like kind of online support groups for people in some sort of relationship with somebody with BDD. So that's a great place to start. I think the one thing I'd like to say while I'm here, which I think is a really big one, is about reassurance. And I think that lots of people can seek reassurance when you have BDD. And it can be one of the behaviors to kind of seek reassurance really compulsively. And when you're somebody who sees somebody, and obviously that can come around with a lot of pain. And so when you see that as somebody who is a loved one, that can be very painful for you, and you just want to help them. And it seems like the most natural thing to do is to say, no, don't worry, you don't look like that. You look fine. There's nothing wrong with you, and all that type of thing. Now, the research has shown, and I know from personal experience as well, that doesn't help, or at best it kind of helps in the short term, a bit like when you scratch an itch and then you get short-term symptom relief, but then actually it kind of makes it persist or makes it worse. So the best thing to do, actually, rather than saying those sorts of things, like which are talking directly to the BDD and the image concern, is to say something like, none of this is prescriptive, right? But something that might be helpful would be like, I really understand, how you're feeling, or to reflect back how they're feeling. I can see that you must be feeling really anxious. I can tell that you're feeling anxious, or what can we do to help you feel a little bit calmer right now? I think something like that is always a good question, that to involve them in it and get them thinking about what actually might be helpful in the situation. Yeah, what can we do that might help you feel a bit calmer right now? Or something really simple, because, really what they're calling out for is they want to just know that they're okay. We all just want that, kind of some love and connection, basically. So even just in silence, just giving them a hug, and letting them know that you're there. And you might want to say, look, I know this is hard and I'm really here for you. And that's a lot more helpful in the long run, and maybe even in the short term, actually, than saying why. Now, maybe I should kind of make it a bit clearer why it's not so helpful, because when you do reassure them, it's actually just reconfirming in their mind that they have an image problem, and that that's what they need to work on, and that's what they need to sort. And therefore it kind of just perpetuates it. And it's never enough. And no doubt, they've probably said something to you like, yeah, but how do you know? Or you're just saying that, oh, it's just because you're my mum, or no, but, and there probably always is a no, but. So they'll ask you, but it never really satisfies them, and it won't ever really, because it's a psychological problem, and until it's dealt with on a psychological level, it's never really going to improve.
Totally. It's really good advice, I guess, also because it's like if you engage in that conversation, you're talking to the BDD as well, aren't you, rather than to the person with the BDD, and actually that's what you don't want to be doing.
Exactly.
Can't really.
Because it's hard when you deal with BDD to separate yourself from the BDD, And it takes quite a big degree of self-reflection to be able to go, okay, that's a BDD thought, that's the BDD talking. But one of the things that you can do as a loved one is provide that separation for them or help them and go, okay, great. And one of the ways you can do that is to talk to the person and what they need, which is to be heard, to be understood about their feelings. And that's the other thing, it's to get that their feeling is valid. People's emotions, their feelings are always valid. It's just that their assessment isn't accurate, but their feeling is valid. And so you can acknowledge the feeling and talk to the person. So yeah, exactly what you said.
Is there anything you know now that you wish you'd known back when your BDD was really bad? Something that you think might help sufferers who are listening in right now?
Yeah, I think the number one thing I'd like people to know is that there's help out there. BDD can be a very lonely place. I think because of the nature of the condition where you feel exposed, you can make it into a very lonely place very easily. And to know that that's okay and to not beat yourself up. And I think it's important to realize, I've realized that BDD, it kind of comes with the territory, beating yourself up. I think if there was a championship, we might win. So to kind of, go gentle with yourself, but also to know that there is help. So I've mentioned the BDDfoundation.org, and OCD Action is another charity that obviously supports people with OCD, but also people with BDD. So I, for instance, facilitate a monthly call, a support group, it's peer-led, i.e., I'm somebody dealing with BDD and everybody else on it deals with BDD. That happens once a month on a Wednesday at 2 p.m. and people can get the details through OCDAction.org. But also there's a whole number of support groups that happen in the evening. And what's great about them is they happen over Skype and without video. So you don't have to be seen. And obviously also you can be wherever you want. You can, I've taken that call from lots of different countries. And also there is help from the NHS to get therapy. And I think one of the best therapies, I do believe, is CBT. So, visit your GP and talk to them about it and see what help you can get. But there is help out there and, it can and it will get better. But just to know that it might not get better at the speed or in the way that you would like it to, but it will get better.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing all your hard-won advice. That was really fantastic. Thanks, Omari.
Bro.
I hope you enjoyed both parts of Omari's story. If you missed the first half, you'll find it on the BDD Foundation website as well as on major podcast apps and Spotify. Just search for episode 8 of Beating BDD. And if you'd like to leave us feedback, as well as find out when new episodes are out, just follow the BDD Foundation on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. So that's it for today. Until next time, please remember that this podcast isn't therapy, so do seek help from a trained professional. Thanks for listening.